Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to Concordia University's Force Space. This is the second part of today's event, What's the Matter? Reimagining More Responsive Human-Object Relationships. And this is our first round table, and this is part of the Critical Materiality Mediation Series. And we would like to begin by acknowledging that Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, and we respect the continued connections with the past, the present, and future, and our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. We are running today's event as both a live stream and to YouTube and as a Zoom meeting. So if you have comments and questions, pop those into the chat. We'll do our best to read those out if we have a chance near the end of the discussion. But enough for me. It's now my pleasure to pass the microphone back to Associate Professor in Design and Computation Arts, as well as the Concordia University Research Chair in Critical Practices in Materials and Materiality, Alice Shari. Alice, it's great to have you back.
Well, thank you, everyone, and thanks for visiting the exhibition. At the break, you will have the chance to pursue this visit and ask more questions to the artists and the designers. So we'll come to this first roundtable about machine ecologies and kinship. So around this table, which is not a table, well, there is a table. we have Natalia Ariola, we have Alexandre Person, we have Rebecca Acone, Cameron Wilson, Thomas Rompré, and Daily Trainer. And we have a special guest, Patricio McClellan, who participated in the class and who is also an artist, designer, and second-year MDes student at Concordia University. So maybe we start by brief intro of each project. I know you did it during the exhibition, but it's not necessarily everyone who was there. So maybe you want to say a few words about each of your project individually, and after Patricio can introduce himself before we move on to the questions period.
Yeah, I'll start. I'm Daly. My project is Ganawish Kodawe. It's exploring traditional indigenous fire stewardship by using sequential aerial mapping in rural BC.
Hi, my name is Thomas Rompré. My project is This Bin Has Fish in It, which is a bin with no fish in it. It is a digital ecosystem which you can interact with using motion capture. This series of fish, algae that interact with one another, live off another, that you can completely disrupt their entire ecosystem by touching their bin with no fish in it.
Hi, I'm Cameron Wilson. I did Button Factory. It's the one about making a lot of buttons and exploring how digital interactions can mimic physical ones or kind of fake that.
Hi, my name is Rebecca. My project, Tender Circuits, is over there. And it's an interactive project that explores light and sensor-based interactions between humans and machines.
Hi, I'm Alexandre Bezen, and my project Immaterial Affect explores memories as digital and their ability to fade away through time. I created a speculative machine where they fade away in front of you.
Hi, my name's Natalia. My project is Everywhere Wind. It's an attempt to make the invisible and intangible visible and tangible through mobile structures and video recording.
Well, thank you, Natalia. I think I have two microphones at the moment. This needs to go back to Patricio.
I have one.
Oh,
this mic is on, I think.
Okay, so that, yeah.
Great. Well, I've been invited here, so thank you all for inviting me. Maybe we could give a quick round of applause to the Force Space and Alice and all the artists here today. Because I took critical materiality 3 years ago, and I know the work that goes into staging something like this, so I think it's pretty amazing. And I'm very happy to be invited to kind of collaborate with you today. So I'm an MDes student in my second or third year, depending on how you look at it. I did my undergrad here, working closely under the supervision of Alice, who I will take this opportunity to say Alice has done a lot to really shape my experience here in different capacities. I'm currently the coordinator at the Speculative Life Cluster in Milieu. which I see as kind of a connective space linking other research groups. And like I said, I came from critical materiality. This was 3 years ago. And it's inspired a lot to do with my graduate research, which is site-specific to Montreal's freshwater infrastructure and its overlapping public spaces, specifically in the area I live in Verdun and the Canal de l'Aqueduc. I ask a lot of questions about how speculative and critical art and design can reveal different articulations of this freshwater infrastructure, and through the use of sensing objects, my own embodied experience, guerrilla encounters, myself as a citizen trying to access inaccessible space and experimenting with these forms of access. I'm trying to create data which I can collect, and that itself becomes a new material which I can use to spur what I would call new and uncomfortable forms of encounter between the citizen and the freshwater infrastructure. So that's a little bit of my background, and I think I brought a lot of where I'm at right now and also where I was 3 years ago in critical materiality today when I came in here. And I just want to say it's amazing to me, this expansive sense of what constitutes material. That was the first thing that I was hit with. So the nuance of what's the matter is not lost on me. It's not lost on me as a viewer. There's a lot of different kind of speculative approaches to mapping, building, reflecting, and ultimately understanding. And this kind of everyone's project or project outcome seems to be inspired by their own critique of the way they understand something. And this want to challenge this way of understanding and meaning making. And then a lot of like special sensitivity to the quality of the invitations. So there's a really, you've built these kind of little small environments that you're inviting people to kind of peer into, and I think it's amazing. And I have a million questions, which I think is why I was invited here. So Alice probably also has a million questions, and that's why we're flanking you on either side.
No.
But I want to ask one critical materiality specific question to you all. Because like I said, I'm coming here today, but I'm also coming here, I'm like time traveling back to 3 years ago. I'm thinking about my own experience and the ways I struggled with synthesizing and communicating these really rich experiences that I had and trying to clean up this kind of mess that I've created in a way which can still communicate complexity. And I'm wondering, did anyone else, and I'm talking specifically about the way that you are presenting this work right now. Did anyone encounter this? Does anyone want to speak to that at all?
That's a really good question. How do we make sense of the mess of practice so it can arrive here at Ford Space? Like, practice is full of back and forth. It's full of mistakes. It's full of failures. It's full of haha moment, of epiphanies, of moment of joy. Not always, hopefully always, but not always. We all know that. So I'm just wondering, like, and I think Patricio is what trying to ask. How do we work, and how do we navigate that zigzag to arrive here with such a wonderful, I wouldn't say finish because everything is always in progress, but a crystallized moment of practice. You want to speak about your process a little bit more? How did you do things? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it is messy, for sure. I think that when you look at like material-led processes in design, it's sort of just like a trust that it's gonna like work out, because you do iterations and prototypes and the first ones suck. Like, it's just like, that's how it is. With mine, like I was doing like these maps and they looked terrible. You couldn't tell what was going on. And there's just sort of like a certain trust that it's eventually you'll figure it out and it'll get there. But I think that just comes with experience, right? Like it's not something that you can just figure out right away, but you just have to know that it'll come eventually, I guess. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyone else wants to respond?
Yeah, I mean, I also think that you kind of have to shout out also like the class and like our kind of cohort. I mean, with my project specifically, it started off with a much wider kind of focus, and pretty soon after I showed the first prototype in class, people were like, no, it's all about the buttons. Like, no one wants to hear about your highfalutin ideas of like digital materiality. People just want to make really cool, like really fun buttons and like find the playfulness aspect of it. And so really for me, I think it's a lot of the like the feedback of the cohort and kind of the collective experience.
Right. I a little bit want to hear about the highfalutin ideas of digital materiality. Just saying. Just saying. Yeah.
Anyone else wants to discuss the process?
So mine was a little bit difficult to navigate because wind is quite a scientific concept and phenomena, but it's also in our everyday as well. And I wanted to shed light on it in a way that everyone could understand it and not in this heavy scientific way. And while in this pursuit of understanding wind, I realized it was human and human-made and natural. So how do I kind of combine such complexity in something that is readable? I also have instructions for all the mobiles that I created because I do want people to engage with wind, regardless of age or ability. And kind of that's my way of sort of communicating my idea and my process so others can experience it as well. But yeah, that's kind of.
Yeah, for me, I feel like this mess wasn't really a problem for me because it was so in my practice. I'm not saying I didn't have any difficulty with the project, but when you do things that are really mostly digital, this mess is kind of controlled by, for example, software and it just. At the end of the day, my project and the mess was more about managing the memories that the class gave me. And it also made me see those memories in a different way because I was managing them as kind of like a tool for my project. And it made me kind of reimagine what my project is about and the fact that memories, they're just another material to play with, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas, do you want to speak a little bit about your process? Yeah.
I have stuff to say if you say so. I do have a hard time usually talking about the design process because I get to the point where I get to work in a project and I completely forget where I came from because I'm so engrossed in it. But I come from a background in game development and game design, and the very big fundamental of games is this fun. It's make an experience fun. It's something if anything, I can say I'm good at making some fun experiences. And interestingly enough, when I came up with this idea of, let's discuss this critique of digital ecosystems now to address in media and such, originally was just, cool water thing to touch, and for back and let's touch fish. And then it came this idea of why not make this kind of basic experience of, you touch fish, things happen, into this very interactive system that works in one another and can exist separately from you, which I believe makes somebody have much more impact when he does interact with the ecosystem, if he interacts at all. It makes for a much more engaging, much more interesting experience. And from there comes this very iterative process of designing an entire ecosystem, which was an entire saga in and of itself to get it working and just get this simulation to behave the way it does. And it's still, in a way, I do not fully understand myself how this ecosystem functions. It was almost intentional on my part to make something that I don't fully understand or can fully predict how it works.
I want to say something to add to what Daly said earlier about having like this mess that you're trying to eventually present to others. And I agree that like I as a designer, I end up trusting that in the end it'll work out and I'll have something nice to show people. But throughout the process, there's always these like invisible checkpoints that only I'm seeing, and it's a very intimate connection that I have with what I'm making. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great, and I mean, there's always, I guess the reason I'm asking is I find there's always the opportunity to show people a little bit in that invitation, right? Is to like maybe be a bit vulnerable and show a little bit of what is behind this kind of high concept curtain that is dividing the work, you know? So I think in Tomas's case, like just showing the Connect, what it's reading in Touch Designer, you had a very practical reason for that, in that you wanted people to understand how to use it. So it's like very didactic in that sense. But for me, it's also like, it shows me what the technology is doing. And so I think in your case, and also Alex's case, and maybe Cameron's case, there's an opportunity to like show that degradation, or like show how that degradation is taking place. But I also think it's very cool to not show. So I'm bringing all this up to come full circle and say that I struggled with this 3 years ago, and I struggle with it all the time. It's like how to communicate this mess in a linear way, you know.
Well, thanks, Patricio. Can I bounce with a question, or do you already have another question? Okay.
You let me know when you want another question.
Okay, sure. I have a question, and something struck me when I hear you talk and I look at your project. And I think it's very present in everyone's work, but at different levels. Sometimes it's more ecosystemic, sometimes it's really a clear artistic gesture. Is this tension between generation, creation, and destruction? In a way that, like when we look at Daly's work, fire, it is both a destructive force, but also a generative one in different contexts. When we look at wind, it's the same thing. Your objects are super fragile, but they witnessed a certain form, but I mean, if you think about a tornado, it's hyper-destructive. You are like actually degrading images and data, and you are creating more generative links, Rebecca, between those little robot creatures, which creates empathy. So you're more on the, I would say, generative side of things, and you are, Cameron, not destroying anything, but deconstructing bias in a way. And assumptions toward technologies and buttons in particular. And you are creating, Thomas, this interesting metaphor where human is both the interactor, but also a kind of destructor of the digital ecosystems it created, because you touch the fish, you kill the fish. So it's a very, I would say, a powerful metaphor. But I mean, there is this tension in all your work. So I want to hear you about this question of how do we work with forces, with ecosystems, with the living and the non-living, and how do we create that dialogue that's about like challenging, deconstructing. All your work seems to be about, like, as Patricio said in the beginning, like challenging the statu quo in a way, either by a clear artistic method, like destroying digital files, or by addressing it through the thematic lens, looking at fire as a generative and destructive force all at once. So I want to hear you about this kind of, it's really present in all your work. And I just discovered that because I just discovered that today. That was not a pre-planned question, but it really kept working with me. So I want to hear you. Like, how is it, you know, how difficult or easy is it to work with wind?
Yeah, it's a difficult material, and coming from an urban design background and contextualizing wind in an urban setting, there are so many factors that make or break wind and our experience and interaction with it. So yeah, it's a phenomenon in itself, and unpacking that is, you start to again see the dualities of human-made versus just natural. You also see pleasant wind, but you also can experience it negatively and aggressively. So yeah, in this process, those are the things I was revealing, because initially I was like, oh, wind is lovely and pleasant, but when it's intense, it can be quite destructive and unpleasant. So those are things I discovered through my process. And I think you bring in biases, but you start to unpack those and make clearer definitions of what a material is by experimenting with it.
Yeah, I feel like gaining is kind of always about losing. And I think that we should be more aware of this process. And just for example, when you're the creator of a photo, when you take a snapshot, usually you feel like it's gonna stay forever, but it's once it's taken, it's kind of almost out of your hand what's gonna happen to it, except if you delete it, but still if you delete it, it's still on your hard drive hidden. But yeah, just knowing about this process is kind of what life is about, kind of. And just life and death, and
Yeah.
I don't want to get too deep.
So where do the files go? What happens in your work
Yeah.
specifically? Do they vanish? Is there a file graveyard somewhere? What's
Well,
happening?
In my case, they never delete because they just fade away in the sense that the pixels, they just get replaced with nothing. Because with PNGs you can have transparency, so essentially the pixels, they just kind of, the colors just become nothing, but the square is still there. So essentially it talks about how a picture is just a bunch of pixels. A picture is at the same time pixel, and at the same time it's the file where it's contained,
Yeah.
So yeah.
And maybe, Rebecca, I'm curious, how is friendship or non-friendship or empathy or non-empathy generated among those little creatures? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so for my project, I think that over time, over like 2 years of playing around with electronics, I've become more comfortable using them as building blocks.
Yeah.
And like Legos, and I see them as Legos now. And yeah, in terms of generating.
How do they interact together or with us? Or I'm just curious because it also goes back to what Patricia was saying, like, how do you translate all the process into something packaged for an exhibition, but the viewer doesn't necessarily know exactly how the systems work and how those little robots operate. And it's interesting because to me, they tend to create this kind of empathy or kinship, but maybe they don't. So I'm just like, give us more detail about that.
I guess it's really for everyone to kind of observe themselves. But like I was saying, I think that using the sensors and electronic components as building blocks to kind of create each state that it has, so a sleeping state, an encounter state, and an idle state. And because like the different parts that I'm using, I have a servo motor, which is just the part that moves the head. I have the LED, and I have the photoresistor, which is the sensor that detects light. And so those components on their own, have their own function, but put together and then built and then combined into this housing that is supposed to resemble, I guess, like a robot, or it's kind of my way of anthropomorphizing a machine. Through all of that, that's how I generate, I guess, care towards them.
Can I riff on these tender circuits for a bit? The form factor of them and the ambient noise of the servo motors is 100% birds to me. Did anyone else get that? Did anyone else feel birds? Was that an intentional decision? Was that something that just came out? Did you realize it after the fact?
I want to say it's intentional, but it's not.
I love that.
At first they were so right now they're moving in kind of a pulsing way, so that's what's creating this chirping noise. You could say it's like imitating birds, or I call them monkeys. Yeah, no, it wasn't intentional, but I think it really adds an extra layer. It adds like sound, kind of a soundscape to it.
And Cameron, do you want to speak about, because Patricio tried to deviate my question.
Oh, did I?
That's a joke.
Sorry.
I'm still interested in this tension between deconstruction or construction in your case, it's really like bias, habits, the way technology is so transparent that we don't notice. So how did you work in your project to kind of deconstruct these kind of these habits with technology and interfaces? And maybe one strategy is isolating technology and just focusing on one element, which is the button. But how did you? What were your methods to engage in?
Yeah, I'm a mostly, I would say, same as Tomas, I'm a mostly digital designer, and this is a very like physical class. So immediately, I kind of knew that I wanted to do something a little bit outside my wheelhouse, and my thesis and my research is all about how in these digital environments, people are enticed by all these kind of like sneaky subconscious ways, and that still happens with your interactions with your devices. Like it is in kind of like, I'm forever jealous of all the incredibly talented like people in the class who work with like physical materials and like visual artists and all that sort of stuff, because and also like they're closer to that material, right? Like when you're making something out of clay, the clay like has qualities, but the clay is always kind of honest with you, right? There's not like Claycom being like, ooh, if we make this clay 10% squishier, this artist is gonna love it. You know what I mean? And so like that is like only present in these designed electronics, which I think is like, at one point, maybe 10 years ago, we were like, wow, like look at how great this like iPhone feels. And now everyone, I think there's like, people are being like, no, I want a stupid phone again. And so I like just kind of highlighting that like, it starts in the very obviously artificial realm, but it kind of like, as we develop technologically and as, circuits get smaller and all sorts of that stuff, it permeates, our day to day. And that was like kind of like how, just like for me, where I saw that I could, critically engage with like the material of the class and still kind of draw from my practice.
Yeah. Thomas, do you want to add a little bit about, I'm really interested in your case about the creation of the digital ecosystem that can still be destroyed by humans because we destroy the real ecosystems. So like, just like, can you expand on that?
I mean, destruction are fundamentally parts of ecosystems, and there's nothing that exists that can survive without having to destroy. The creatures eat each other, the plants eat each other underground for roots. They're fundamentally very violent entities, despite the fact they can't really show it because they're plants. So that is a very natural part of the ecosystem. What we don't fail to grasp, what we have a hard time picturing is the absolute colossal scale of an ecosystem, right? So on a human level, when we, for example, squish a fly, or we go hunting, I guess we kill a fish, you eat it, we don't really see the full consequences of that because it's a drop in a bucket, or we simply cannot picture the entire thing. When you have to create an ecosystem from the top down and design it, it gets complicated really fast. And as much as I use this as a critique of how we portray or abstractize ecosystems of video games or any kind of media, which is here's this wild forest which we explore, and here's 10 boars in a circle that respawn every 10 seconds, and that's their idea of an ecosystem. But when you try to make an entire system where every single entity rests upon another for interaction and their behavior, you realize that it is insanely complex to try and balance, and it's almost kind of an impossible task to do. And it gets to a point where, is there really a reason to balance this out? If that is part of the fun of systems, especially in games and media, is to see how they behave one another, what comes out of the system, what happens when I push, tug, and pull at it. As a player, you are an agent in that system. You're effectively a black box to do whatever you want, which includes being completely passive, walking past it, or killing every fish, like some people have tried doing today here. And that is the fun of it. The fun you make, especially as a game designer, is what you make of it, honestly. You have the fun the way you want to. And this is not, when I design these games, especially these ecosystems, there isn't a specific experience in mind, a very guided thing, almost like a movie or a book. It is, here are tools, here's a sandbox, do whatever you want with it. And if that includes killing every single fish, so be it. You can break the ecosystem if you want. It's a toy, it's not real, it's digital. The bin has no fish in it. That is the whole point. And I believe that was my MO for this, really, yeah.
Okay. And Davey, I'm interested in hearing you about this tension between fire as a destructive versus generative force and regenerative as well. So maybe, speaking about like that cultural practice and also how fire plays out underground, because what I found interesting is that your methodology and your methods and your angle is top down to look at maps and from above. So, but soil is very lively, but you look at it from a very distant perspective, which is absolutely super interesting. Can you just expand on that question of like, how does fire, soil, forest interact? What's that practice a little bit? Because we could, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it ties into what Thomas was saying. Like, it's just scale of these ecosystems, right? Like, if you went and walked in a landscape, you could see, especially one that's been burned, you can see that it's been burnt. And for you in that moment, it looks like it's been destroyed or deteriorated. But there's also the scale of time, right? Like, that's kind of what my project was trying to highlight, is like, in any given moment, you can't tell what's really going on. But when you start to look at, years and years, and over the course of 5 years, you can start to see that this is actually something that can really help regenerate the ecosystems. And so I think with some of the technology that we have right now, it's so easy for us to try to examine everything in the now and in the moment. But sometimes we have to slow down a bit and take our time with it, and then you'll start to see that some of these practices are actually really helpful, and we don't need to, necessarily use chemicals and all these things to try to prevent wildfires. There's been practices for years and centuries that have been very effective at doing this. So I think sometimes we just need to slow down a bit and take a look, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you. I will let Patricio continue.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you,
Well,
Alice.
the mic is in that.
Maybe we could keep talking about tension, because it occurred to me that part of what's going on in What's the Matter is there's this hypothesized agency in a materials. Agency is a word that comes up a lot. We use it in a lot of different ways for a lot of different reasons. But there's a hypothesized agency in a material's ability to retain traces of memory. And I think this is expressed in a lot of different projects in a lot of different ways. But what I'd like to zoom in on is how your experience with material and the memory that is created changed between those who used or those who experimented with a tangible form of material and an abstracted form of material. Because I think there is this tension within the group of people, and I think, Cameron, you were just alluding to this. It's like, what's the difference between the way we codify using clay and the way we codify using code, right? So I would love to talk about this a little bit more, because some projects use like digital realms as a material, some use these physical, tangible materials, and some use both. So I'd really like to talk about those parts of your process.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I could maybe pass this to Cameron, but it seems like it. But I would just say, like, in my case, it's kind of digital, trying to represent the physical, which is something that it's not like it's so hard to do, because it's never going to be the full experience. There's so many more senses to something than just seeing it. And for me, I'm not used to working digitally, so it was a little bit of a weird process. But I think it's needs a lot more attention now, because we're so heavily involved in the digital space. But there's sort of this like a tension, right, between the digital, and now we're trying to bring back some really healthy and sustainable practices to try to bring back our ecosystems and stuff like that. I think there's opportunities to do it digitally, but I'll pass it to Cameron, because I think you probably have more thoughts.
Can I just, on that note, Daly, because you said that this was like a first experience for you with these kind of like digital forms of media, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a really special moment. So I just, I think you should appreciate that it's a special moment. Like, I remember a professor in the design department encouraged me to like appreciate the naivety that I had when I was using these new materials, because I would never have that again. So I just think that that's a really special thing that's maybe afforded by a class like critical materiality, is like this encouragement to take risks. And I see this room full of all the risks that have been taken. So I think, yeah, it's really special. And
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, well, actually, it's funny that you mentioned that, because my project is kind of a mix of both, because I also did the cabinet that it's in. And let me tell you, I got my butt kicked. Special shout out to the DigiFab Lab. I think it took us like 5 tries. It took me 5 tries to figure it out. And they were very patient and supportive throughout. I did a lot of wood shop and stuff in high school from like a small town, 15 years ago. And so I came into this project feeling pretty good about myself. And if you happen to walk by, you can just take a look at how stripped some of the screws on there are, how many, fake holes. We had a couple eyeball where I just tried to drill it straight through. First, I was gonna like glue it, because I had these beautiful panels, and I was like, I don't wanna put a screw through them. And then, as you can see, that went out the window pretty fast behind me, because I did not manage to get at a point with the wood shop. So I was like, no problem, I'll go to Home Depot. That's a little small for what Home Depot's cuts are. So I ended up out on my balcony with a camping saw, just hacking at framing like 2x2s in the snow like a madman. Nothing was flush, nothing was square. And so I just have like, there's 4 or 6 pieces of wood in there, and it's all the ones that Home Depot could cut for me that I managed to salvage. And like my floor is covered in like weird little bits of 2x2. So it like the mess is there for sure. It's not where I want it to be. I think that it definitely impacted my project. The digital side is a lot less complete. It's more toy-like than initially was planned, and that is because of my own hubris. And yeah, like I do think like it's an important part of the project to do that whole like cabinet thing. And I think if it was just like a loose tablet, it would not be the same kind of thing. But I do, I mean, again, it's not the material that I'm most familiar with, but I do think that there's just something about the tangible. Like I'm also like incredibly jealous of your project, and I don't know where Hayako is, but like in just like the amount of like emotional meaning you're able to get out of like so little like actual, I mean, I understand a lot of work went into the circuits, but like, like the recipes as a material is genius. Like those little guys are so expressive, and like, there was a lot of swearing and stuff that went into that cabinet, and I'm very proud of it, but it's also like a very maximalist project. Like I was doing a lot to get people to look at buttons. And I remember coming in here and being like, that's really good, and that's a great scope, and it's just like, I don't know, it's so efficient. So there's always tension. I think the grass is always greener, and like there's always stuff you could do.
Yeah, I guess to add to what Patrizio said earlier, like you have to go through that first layer of like working with a new material, and then you're already coming out stronger because of it. So yeah, props. And I want to talk about, I guess, the tension in my project a little bit more. I think the tension lies in the non-human versus the human. So I'm trying to emulate human-like features in the non-human. So that's where my tension lies. And like I said earlier, I'm really using these materials as building blocks. And yeah, there's kind of a meaning that comes out of, I guess, like the simplicity of it, right? So, yeah.
I come mostly from a digital art background, honestly. I am absolutely abysmal with anything physical arts and crafts. Since I was a kid, I got in trouble for not being able to color properly, even cut things straight. So having the opportunity to work on physical things, I rarely get the opportunity to actually work on that. Not because I don't want to or don't have the skills. For me, it was always a question of materials, of getting access to these materials, being able to work for them, or simply having the funds to even be able to afford those, have the space and the time to work with this. With a digital, where that comes from is it cost me virtually nothing to try and pull and break things. And that's kind of how I figured things out, is by essentially fiddling with something. Eventually I get something to work, and then I accumulate that prior knowledge to that, and then you can mash that together in a bigger project, and so on and so forth. That's usually why I stick to the digital. This is actually my first time using a Connect for anything, and I think most of this project was trying to figure out what you can and cannot do with a Connect, and being surprised last seconds that there are very specific things it cannot do that does throw a wrench in this entire operation, really. This thing working on water, there was a very real possibility that the water would affect the infrared sensors on a Connect that I didn't know if it was actually going to break the entire thing until yesterday when I finally set the thing up, which the giant plexiglass bin, thank you Alice, by the way, for your bin, that I had to clean up and fix. Originally, I thought I was just gonna, I'll get like a plastic bin from Walmart or whatever, right? You know, it's a box, it needs to hold water, it doesn't matter, and it really does. So after some last minute testing when trying out the code, I was using like a blue recycle bin at home, and turns out it's opaque, so it breaks the entire thing. You can't see your hands when it's behind it, so it's a hard time figuring out depth and such like this. And it's very small things like this that make it really hard for me to work with tangible things. However, tangibility has such an intuitive way, in a very human, a very like satisfying way to be interacted with, that you cannot replicate with digital things. A core example of this, for example, is motion controls, which are like the big hot thing in the late 2000s, early 2010s. Connect is the proof that essentially it is a failed motion capture controller that was originally used for games. It's not in production anymore. Now it's used by artists and in physical installation people because it's a great and super versatile, cheap motion sensor, and it works really, really well for this. But still, I think this works particularly well because it is paired with tangible elements. It's not just you moving around on a fake bin. I think part of the fun is really being able to touch and feel the water and look at the water's ripples and effects and how it visually affects the ecosystem. There is a fun in playing with this that needs to be mixed up in a way that you interact with the Connect itself. The Connect here is more so a necessity to have a way to be able to touch the water. If there was some kind of magic sensor that would give me XY coordinates when I touch a surface of the water precisely, I would have used it. But this was the closest equivalent I could find that I could also replicate this kind of knowledge or skills I would develop from learning how to use this piece of technology onto other things. To my point, yeah, tangible's fun. It's just, it's a mess with it to play with it. Just getting the resources really is the main issue for me, so.
Yeah, I think that the digital is kind of like a tool for abstraction. And you can see that in many things in our lives. For example, social media, which is reinventing kind of our relationships, or just in the scope of my project, more memories and the fact that they just take a new form. And recently there's been like a trend towards going back. I mean, recently, like for a while, but a trend like to go back to like developing film and stuff. And I've seen people around me, they take film pictures and then they put it in the fridge because they want it to stay forever. And that's not the process you really see in when you take a picture with your phone, except when you're like an archiving maniac. But yeah, I think that the digital is really abstracting every part of our lives, and I don't know if that's a sad statement or a hopeful statement, but
It can be both.
Yeah.
Can be both.
Natalia, do you want to say a few words?
Sure. So I guess, again, going back to the fact that wind is both a natural and human-made essence and material, I tried to recreate that in the way that I'm capturing and depicting it by using both digital and actual physical materials. And I will say that both my apartment and my computer look like a junkyard in their respective ways. But that's, again, like that mess is an intimate mess because it's a reflection of just investigating and trying to depict something in two different forms. And it kind of embraces the kind of like two streams of design that can be digital or can be tangible. And I really wanted to celebrate that, the duality of design in that sense.
Super interesting. Can I ask a question, Patricio?
Yeah, it's kind of like ping pong that's
That's
happening.
it. Anyway, so it's interesting because, well, of course, all your projects have this kind of machine-made, human-made components. And I'm just wondering, okay, we talk about, like, you don't necessarily use AI in your project, but there is a form of machine intelligence in certain way, technological intelligence that your projects rely on. Okay. And what kind of ethical responsibilities come with it for you as a designer? Like, is it to engage in more transparency with the user? Is it in terms of recycling your electronic components? Is it in terms of using open source tools? Like, what are the ethics of working with the digital and even if it's wind machine? Yeah. I'm just wondering.
Accessibility is something that is very important to me, which is why I tried to make something that you could replicate at home, provide you a pathway to do that. So again, just using very basic forms and mediums allows me to feel like I'm taking care of this and sharing it in an ethical way. Yeah, I think that's how I would answer that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with your project, the wind is like, when we think of renewable energy, we instantly think of wind. But when with the digital, it's more, as I said, it's more abstract. For example, like literally last night, I left my project running here, and ForSpace was about to close, and like I ran there to like turn off the computer, because I was like, oh my god, it's gonna it's gonna waste energy for like the whole night staying there. So yeah, I guess with the digital, there is so many ways you can go about creating ethically. Just like Alice said, I guess using open source software, knowing where your data is stored, and just I think just being aware that the immaterial is actually material, and that there's waste that goes into that is a practice we should do more often.
I think for me, working with, I guess, electronic components, it's definitely hard to, it's not the most sustainable material, especially using like PLA 3D printed filaments. But I think that for a lot of my projects, I've definitely tried to repurpose them. So already looking at my little creatures, I'm already thinking of how I could, make a bigger, like a larger scale version of them. So having a bunch of them, and then creating a sound space, using them for music, using them for, a bunch of other things, other paths that I could take with them. And I have done that with little custom controllers, using those for sound or visuals, or there are a lot of ways you can repurpose a project. So I think that's one way that I do it.
Yeah, I mean, everything that Alex already said, kind of thing. Also, for mine, in the initial kind of pitch, there was like, and a lot of people said like, oh, it'd be cool if it like kept track of like what's the best button, and that is not in there, largely because I spent so long fighting with a cabinet, I'm going to be honest. But I do kind of like the project more now that it's just a toy. Like I feel like if at the end of this I came back like, guess what? If you made a different button, you're wrong. Like that you know what I mean? That is not like, first of all, it's not respectful to the people whose data we're collecting for weird reasons. And second of all, it like, who am I to make something that is interactive and then invalidate your experience, right? It doesn't say make the best button, it says make your favorite button. So, like I do think also, especially when it comes to internet connected stuff, like there's an ethical responsibility around, privacy of the audience.
I'm more or less, I say I more or less have thoughts about the ethical part of it, because usually I tend to stick to things that are not destructive in a way, like, water as a tool, which we're in Canada, we sort of have it in abundance, I guess. I am just going to throw water in the drain afterwards, but I'd rather not. Yeah, I know, but still, the water is not gone. Again, it is transferred. It goes back into the cycle and everything. But I do try to keep if I have to spend money on materials or something, to not have it be a one-time purchase or not waste materials or equipment or anything. Naturally, the bin, I assume you're taking it back, please, because I don't have to move the thing again. It's a pain. You are taking it back, right? The giant bin, the 6 feet free bin you gave me for the project?
I'm taking it back.
I mean, are you going to use it again for something else? Or
Of course.
Okay, thank God.
We use it in the lab all the time.
Okay, good, because again, I don't have a use for a giant plexiglass bin, so I'd love that someone else, or another one of you students later on, will be able to use it. Same thing for the equipment I use. The entirety of the projectors and Connect stuff, all borrowed from various clubs that I believe that, they should have the equipment to be used for other students that work on this. I've already donated some of my own equipment that I purchased for one project in Concordia back to that studio. As for AI, the only reason I use AI, that's from a programmer's perspective, is it essentially works as a Google that's really good at parsing through angry forum posts that are poorly worded. So when you have to learn how to code something or figure out how a specific tool functions, some forums are not the most helpful source of advice, and AIs are really good at parsing it. Problem. AI, the main goal is to satisfy you, meaning they will go to lengths such as hallucinating or making up tools or things that do not exist, which is a big problem when you're trying to figure out a software, when they're essentially telling you to do things that cannot possibly function or simply do not exist. And you figure it out because you build the thing and realize it doesn't actually work because you're using things or calling on functions or methods or tools that do not exist. So half of this is actually just struggling with an AI. So at the end of the day, no, it's not coded by an AI. It is simply figuring out. So touch designer's documentation is so overcomplicated that even an AI can't figure out at this point. It's one of the challenges of this. And obviously, I would rather not. Obviously, I try to avoid AI as much as possible, purely for the obvious reasons and implications of what it is, especially when it comes to creating art. None of this is. I'm not getting an AI anywhere near when it comes to art or this. It's entirely made by hand. It's noise, essentially. It's very basic algorithms, but still.
I mean, what else can I say? I like what Cameron said. Is it on? Going? Yeah.
Yeah, it's working.
I don't know. I like what Cameron said. Like, it's a certain responsibility to give people the freedom to do what they want to do. Like as designers, sometimes it feels like we have to be imposing this solution. Like, this is it. I came up with my idea. This is the design. But at the same time, there's so much freedom that we can give other people to express themselves and have that agency. I think that is a lot more, a much better use of our skills and our time than giving someone a definitive solution, right? So, yeah, I'm sure Patricio has some more questions, maybe?
I'm
Are you
just
done?
looking at how much time do we
But
have?
that's it. I was looking at time, and maybe one last question, and we open up to the public.
Sure, or
yeah.
we just open it up
We
to
can open it up to the public, I think.
I've asked enough questions for now.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Anyone has questions or comments about their work?
Yes, we have a microphone here, so if anyone wants
Yeah.
a microphone, just raise your
Jump
hand.
in. Feel free to be spontaneous.
Hi, thanks everyone for your presentations. I have a thought jumping off Alice's question about ethics. And it sort of leads me to think about a step further in the idea of compassion and care when we're choosing materials, because we're looking at materials. How can we choose better materials or have materials that are kinder to humans and the planet and the environment? And I think there's an element of, in the beginning, choosing materials and processes that are kind and ethical, but also the result of the project also produces different ways of looking at things and thinking about things. And the tender circuits, to me, those generate a feeling of empathy and of care, and it sort of generates this question of what constitutes a body when you abstracted into these parts and put it back together, and they can't feel, but we have feeling when we're looking at them because they're cute and they're like little chirping baby birds. And then but just sort of comparing that to, say, a video game where, everything is killed or there's a natural, like a death. And I guess I'm wondering, like, in your design practices, do you think about compassion and care and the result of what you're putting out there? And how does that reflect in the work and the projects that you've made today?
Yeah, I could go first. And yeah, there are parts to my project that are not visible. So the inner work, like the inner circuitry, all the wires, I had to be very careful soldering those. I've had to redo them because they weren't working properly. It's a very finicky, I guess, material to work with. So there is definitely a lot of care going into it. I'm very detailed with it and just always being careful with it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think to the point of if you're going to take data from somebody in this day and age that usually lives somewhere else, I don't have the capability to run my own data collection service. I'd probably use a tool from a company that would put it somewhere and then do God knows what with it. And so, I think for me, just the question of can we not, or do we have to, how about no, right? Has been, especially coming from industry where it's always and then we do this, and then we do this, and then we take this, and then we take that, can we not?
Anyone else wants to answer? Yeah. Now, I find it really interesting, this question, this comment around care and compassion, because there's different levels and forms and directionalities for care and compassion. It can be in choosing materials, but it can also be toward care toward the user or the viewer or the person who will interact with your work, and how you design a careful experience or experiment. So there's different level, because you could be careful in choosing your materials and and looking at the whole life cycle of the object, but you could also be careless in the user experience. So it kind of goes together. So anyone else wants to respond to that question, or maybe someone else in the public has another comment or question? Camilla, yeah.
I have a question for Natalia. It's really fascinating, the work that you're doing with wind, and that wind is used as a material. I mean, I never thought about it in that way. So the process that I'm looking at is sort of making kin with wind itself, and then responding to the wind. And it's fascinating that they're still moving here, although there is not much wind going on, but there's air. So in the process of going through this making of these sculptures that respond and make kin with the wind, what do you think was the role of sort of knowledge making in terms of what the material does, so you can reflect to it, and what's the role of sort of let's say dominance versus coexistence?
I would say that I got the most information in that realm when I actually went out in the public and started experimenting with the spinner. Because in certain moments it would be really just beautifully flowing, but when the wind was really aggressive, it would actually kind of come off of the rod. And that made me reflect on, wow, wind can be delicate and it can be so powerful at the same time. And then having the added bonus of using iPhone embedded sensors to kind of quantify what the wind was, and seeing how the numbers were matching up to what I was experiencing, revealed so much to me. And another important kind of or interesting thing that I noticed is inside where the strongest winds were. I thought outside, kind of in elevated points. I mean, I didn't go all over Montreal, but Inside of the metros was where I found the most powerful wind, and I was like, that is crazy, because that's technically like human-made wind that's inside, which was the complete opposite of what I thought were what I thought the results would be while experimenting with it. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Maybe one last question or comment? Yes, milady.
So thank you for your presentations. One of the things that I really found interesting about your projects is the interplay with artificial material, the tangible, and also relating it to the human experience. So can you talk about, now that you've created these series of projects, who do you anticipate the end user to be, or how do you see your project changing society for the better or not?
You have a lot of pressure. Who wants to answer?
I can just quickly jump. As an urban designer, I'm now going to look at wind so critically, and in everything I design, I'm going to ask myself how it's interacting with the material that I've been critically investigating, and seeing that scale and sort of the way the built environment shapes wind and vice versa is going to be something I probably am never going to forget when I'm trying to design something physical in the public realm.
Yeah, just quick. I just think my project, for example, it's about just thinking twice about what you produce and how you just upkeep that relation with the past, and just make people think twice about how, as time passes, also does your memories, and this goes on inside of your brain, and also inside of the medium where you upkeep them, such as every single digital medium with which you can take pictures.
I think for me, it's about reshaping human-machine connection, or even just human-object connection. You could, and throughout my whole project, I've been thinking, okay, if I put googly eyes on anything, suddenly I have a connection to it because it's somehow alive to me, and that kind of completely changes the way I see that thing. And that's exactly what I did for my project. So yeah.
I think I'm also in the Alex Think Twice camp, just, getting people to think about if, am I enjoying this digital experience, or has it been designed to be very agreeable to me, kind of thing.
Oh, I thought I would have a bit more time. It's okay. I don't know what camp I'm in necessarily. I guess just trying to take like a different perspective that we don't typically see, right? Like aerial imagery is not something the human eye really will get to experience. And by looking through these different perspectives, you sort of get a lot more information that you'd never quite understand until you saw it. So I guess it's just about raising awareness and trying to sort of, embrace different perspectives, because we're so sort of tied down to ourselves and the things that we're used to. But if we sort of expand that into perspectives of others, whether it be humans or machines or landscapes, there's a lot more that we can learn than what we currently know. Yeah.
Thank you. Patrice, one more question or comment, just to make sure we're all good? So Patricia, do you want to say a concluding remark? It can be
concluding remark?
It could be an open question.
I'm starting to think more about the different, Alice, you said care on different levels, and it's like resonating so much, because I think that we could talk about different spheres of accessibility and ethics forever in terms of our thing making and our thing doing, but I think everyone is really, there's a real sensitivity to these kinds of things in this class. And as a viewer and a spectator, I'm picking up on all of it, and I really appreciate being invited here, so thank you.
Yeah. I want to congratulate each and every one of you for the thorough project, the excellent process, the excellent organization, and I send you virtual flowers that I don't have with me at the moment. Thank you so much. And thank you, Patricio, for joining us today. We'll take a 20-minute break, and we'll be back with the second roundtable and our second guest, Christo Riffaut.
All right, so yes, thank you again for joining us. Yes, people on Zoom, we'll just have a really short break, 20 minutes, and we'll be back with roundtable number 2. So thank you.